Okay, so we are back with another tier list video here today. Now, last time we did the number tier list where we ranked numbers from 1 to 9 with a few special numbers at the end. Today we're doing something very similar, but instead we're going to be ranking shapes. Now, we're going to be looking at a few different shapes and seeing which ones are better than the rest. Since most shapes start turning into circles as you increase the number of sides, we're going to be looking at a few basic shapes from a circle to a hexagon, then a few extra shapes I don't see as often but that are still pretty cool. Alright, here we go. Starting off with a circle. Now the circle is the most basic shape of all, but that doesn't make it any less important. The circle is the only shape that has 0 sides, or an infinite amount if we're getting technical. Without circles we wouldn't have any modern transport vehicles, camera lenses, Ferris wheels, or basically anything that makes our lives more interesting. The circle is the perfect shape, so it goes in the S tier. Next off is the triangle. Now the triangle is an objectively weird shape considering it can come in 4 different forms, but neither one of them are appealing in any way. There's a whole unit of math dedicated to triangles and no part of it is fun nor easy. However, the redeeming quality of triangles comes in the shape of food, whether it's a perfect slice of pizza, or the perfect potato chip, or a grilled cheese sandwich cut diagonally, which yes is the only correct way to cut it. Overall, triangles are unappealing, so they get a C tier placement from me. Alright, so now we have squares. Squares are just nice to look at. You have 4 90-degree angles that are all working in unison to create this satisfying shape to look at. Squares can be found in all parts of everyday life, whether it's a chessboard with 64 squares, or a vinyl record cover in the form of a square, or the many different companies that have square logos. Squares are everywhere, and for good reason too. They get an A tier ranking from me. Alright, next up we have rectangles. Now rectangles are just a beta version of squares. They're long, unequal, and just look out of place. While most of the technology we use, whether it's a computer, a phone, or televisions, come in the shape of a rectangle, it doesn't make the shape itself any better. It's more of a useful shape rather than an appealing one, so for that reason it can go in the B tier. Next up is the Pentagon. Now the Pentagon is just an inherently ugly shape. It has an uneven number of sides which disrupts its symmetry. It's mostly drawn in 2 different ways, each way being worse than the other. It's also very uncommon in everyday practice, and when someone asks you to name a shape, the Pentagon never comes to mind first, or second, or at all for that matter. It's truly a bad shape, so it has to go into the F tier. Next on our list is the hexagon. Now the hexagon is a pretty cool shape and the last regular shape before all the sides start looking like they shouldn't be there. Hexagons are found everywhere in the real world, from honeycombs to the shapes on a soccer ball to the 2D shape of a pencil. Hexagons are also used extensively in science, mainly in organic chemistry, to make the majority of chemical compounds we know today. The hexagon plays its role perfectly and goes into the A tier for me. Alright, now we're going to spice it up and go 3D, starting with the cube. The cube is like a square, but better. It takes all the things that makes a square great, but takes it to another dimension. Literally. Cubes can be found everywhere, whether it's a Rubik's Cube, a sugar cube, or even ice cubes. It gets an S tier ranking without thinking twice. Next up is the pyramid. Now the pyramid as a shape isn't very interesting. It's just an extended triangle on top of a square base. The only thing that makes the pyramid relevant is, you guessed it, the pyramids in Egypt. If these weren't a historical landmark, no one would talk about them unless you're an avid fisher or hunter. The pyramid shape is trying too hard to be something it's not, so we'll humble it and put it in the D tier. Now we take a look at the star shape. It's not a shape you see very often, but definitely has an interesting design to it. A 10-sided shape with 5 edges is something to be impressed by. Stars also show up on many flags, which most people tend to forget about. Stars are pretty cool, so they'll get a B tier ranking from me. Alright, so I ran out of shapes when thinking which to include, so I decided to find some on Google, and these two came up, the triquetra and the lemniscate. Let's see what they bring to the table. Starting with the triquetra, which is really cool in its design. It's like a hybrid between triangle and a circle, but it works really well. It's a very cool design if you're thinking of getting a tattoo, and it also has a deeper meaning rooted in it. The triquetra isn't a shape you see often, or one you may even know the name of, but it looks cool, and that's good enough to get an A tier ranking from me. And last but not least is the lemniscate, which is just a fancy name for what we all know as the infinity symbol. I do like the idea behind the design with 2 interconnected circles representing an infinite loop. While it may not have much use outside of being the infinity symbol, it is the only shape that gives you a number when you flip it around. That gives it some extra points in my book, so we'll give the lemniscate a B tier ranking today. And that's how our shape tier list adds up for now. Honestly, I was feeling pretty generous today, as most of the rankings are in the top half of the list, but nevertheless, it's yet another solid tier list for me, which is to be expected. Let me know what you guys think of it, and I'll see you next time.